Gary Sales, writer-producer, and the madman himself, actor Paul Ehlers. How you guys doing?
Well, we are fine, thank you very much.
Very well, thank you. Very well. Good spirits. Beautiful spring day in New York here as we speak.
That it is.
Yeah, I heard you guys were suffering through those 50-degree winters, those 50-degree winter days this year. So.
Hey, it saved my ass. I just wrapped 17 days of shooting on the new film noir picture, The Girl on the Train, and having nicer weather did not hurt us.
Excellent.
Yeah, so it's all good, and as happy as a New Yorker, I'm happy to have some decent weather. I'm a little surprised, and I'm definitely curious about what it's going to mean for the summer, but not having 57 inches of snow like we had the year before was not a big problem for me.
Not at all. I think it was colder when we filmed Madman than it's been all winter. I mean,
heck yeah. I mean, look, if you look at the if you look on the DVD when we went and shot the feature, which was supposed to be a featurette that turned into a feature about 30 years of Madman. That's on the new 30-year anniversary DVD release. When we went we went back to the original site where we shot, and we were standing around like. In 2 foot of snow as we stomped around there trying to find some of the old remnants of what was there when we shot the show. I mean, I don't know if I'm going out of order here, but since I'm talking about it, while we were shooting it, we said, well, we went back there. They had raised the entire property. There was no more of anything we had known there. The main house was gone. All the cabins were gone. The trees were standing, and we stomped around in the snow looking for any kind of a clue as to what was where and what. And so the odd thing was that all around it, though, was all of these 1 and 2 acre 6-bedroom home estates had been built all around it, and the only thing that had not been sold and moved on and built up was the property we shot Madman on. So we certainly wondered whether or not we left a mark greater than the just making of the film, at least as far as the real estate community was concerned, because somehow was not able to develop that property since then.
Well, that was a couple of things I was curious about. Number one, where did you shoot? What was the location?
This was in an area called Fish Cove, which is out in East Hampton, right, Paul?
Yes.
Yeah, we're out on Long Island, just before you get to the posh Southampton and and all that great stuff where all the big expensive places are. There was a little inn there owned by a guy who had just finished a stint as the financial advisor to the little baby guru Maharaji. And he and his family had been traveling the world with the guy for a few years, amassing lots of capital and buying limousines and all things. And he had finished that work, and him and his wife went off with their 5 kids or whatever and bought this Fish Cove Inn, which they kept as a really nice little resort. When we went out there to scout it, there was all kinds of teepees on the land, and they were running all kinds of alternative, weekend sessions for shamans and all this kind of cool yoga stuff. This is back in like 1980 when we were scouting, so it was pretty advanced for the time. Eventually, all this is now normal mainstream stuff, but back then they were on the edge of alternative stuff. So they were great. Took us a little bit, but we made a wonderful deal with them to house the entire crew and cast in the resort and use everything that was there for shooting purposes, including we even hired their chef who cooked for us on a regular basis, and he was fantastic. And it was a great little all-in, almost a theater event, in that respect, because everybody came out on distant location and we all shared the days and the nights together, mostly the nights because we shot entirely nights. It was a great experience in those days. Very, very a lot of fun.
So you didn't actually shoot at during the day and then just give the faux night cover. You actually shot at night.
We were too young and stupid. I mean, we were just, it was the early days of our careers. We weren't smart enough to come up with how to do a split day and shoot interior in the day and go out at night. We went out and said, well, it's a night picture. Everything takes place between dusk and dawn. Great, we'll shoot all night long. So we just got into a night schedule, which to some degree sometimes is actually, when you're doing it as long as that, for 5 weeks or whatever, everybody gets into it after the 5th week and it works. I don't think I could do that again now. It just it's just easier on people to try to do splits. We would go and shoot interiors during the day and then come out after the sun went down, shoot the exteriors, and go back and forth. But sometimes it's useful to get into a night thing just for the biorhythms of everybody and just stay in it. Because flipping back and forth, not everybody turns around that quickly, so it's sometimes helpful to do it in blocks. But in this case, no, we just went hard at it, and that was how it went. And it was, back in those days, it was the typical New York fall and winter, and it got colder sooner. In fact, we weren't really supposed to shoot out on Long Island. The original location was upstate in the mountains. But as we got closer to filming, it was getting a little cooler, and nothing went exactly on schedule when we were raising the money. No, a day or two here and there you get. You don't get it all. And by the time we got all the money put in position, it was late August. So that by the time we got really into casting and doing everything, we were in mid-September. We're starting to get a little cool. Temperatures are dropping under 30 every night upstate, so we started hunting for another location that would be closer and warmer, and that led us to Fish Cove Inn in Long Island, which turned out to be great for us for what it was. I mean, what we lacked there was a real mountainy thing. We would have had a little more mountainous stuff out upstate. But in a night-for-night picture, it's not so easy to tell where the mountains end and the flat land begins anyway, so it turned out to be okay.
The funny thing is, the other thing I was thinking about when I watched the movie, and this is as a filmmaker myself, at the time you made this film, this was basically, the second Halloween movie had just come out. You had the second Friday the 13th movie had just come out. You had movies like Evil Dead. You had your movie. You had The Burning, which was another, camp counselor type movie out there where they get killed by a madman.
The Burning is a special case because The Burning, actually, there's a story attached to that, and that's that as we were casting in September of '80, we started getting responses from the cast that was coming in saying, gee, this is very familiar. I think I read for something like this a couple weeks ago. And that went on for a few days, and then one girl came in and said, this scene that I'm reading here, my boyfriend is working on a movie up in Buffalo right now, and I'll tell you, this is almost exactly the same actions as that scene. I'm sure it's like the same legend. Because we never really Joey, the late Joe Giannone Jr., who was the screenwriter, I co-wrote the story with him, and he wrote the screenplay, and he directed. He and I never wanted to let go of the name of the legend, which was something that came from me from my childhood days up in the Catskills. There was the very well-known or somewhat known legend of the Cropsey. And the Cropsey was, being told all across upstate New York and even down in the city in Staten Island area. It was one of these kind of legends that everybody knew. And so we were going to make the Cropsey legend, but we weren't going to put it up front. We were going to wait till we were done and then, use that as a title thing. That's why we called the movie The Legend Lives. Originally, it was the original title of the movie that we were working on. Well, as we're going through this stage of casting, and these people are saying this is sounding familiar, finally we get this one girl, like I say, that says, my boyfriend's doing this up in Buffalo. So our production manager at the time, the late Mark Silverman, who was also the production manager on Blood Simple, the first Coen Brothers movie,
Yep.
He knew the people upstate. So he quickly got on the phone. Those days we had no email, remember. We were a backward bunch, to be sure. And we managed to get what was the most advanced form of communication those days. We got it FedEx down to us. And we got the script the next day. Joey and I read it and said, oh, my God, they're doing the Cropsey legend. And they were like 5 weeks ahead of us. So we both looked at each other, and this was like a Friday, and we said, gee, we don't know what to do. We can't really make the same thing. We felt like that would be odd coming to the market with the same name and the same stuff, and they would be ahead of us. So we basically put everybody on a hold for the weekend, and he and I sat around trying to figure out how to handle it. And we went to some bar that night, and we literally read the script and rewrote the script to step away from what was originally the Cropsey and recreated and revised it to become what has become Madman. And
what are the odds?
What are the
odds? What are the odds that you would be filming almost an identical feature. That two different filmmaking groups would just both decide to use that legend within a few weeks of each other and start filming.
It's pretty cuckoo. But leave it. Look, this was another set of Jewish producers, young Jewish boys who had probably done the Catskill Mountain tour, because those producers of The Burning, as you well know, were Bob and Harvey Weinstein, of later to be Miramax fame.
Right.
That was their first picture. So they probably knew the same legend we did. And it was just one of those things. And yes, the odds are ridiculous. But when you're making movies, I find that when you're trying to grab the universe by the throat and wrestle it to the ground to suit your purposes, that's when it decides to kind of struggle away from you and fight back. And it's not willing to give in to your schedules, your timing, your weather requests, your actor requests, or anything else. And it throws back at you what it wants to. So that was one of the things that threw back at us. And you just respond, in producing films or any other endeavor where you're trying to organize things to suit your own purposes. You just simply have to respond to it when it doesn't go your way. So that's how we responded. We sat down, we rewrote the script, we came up with a new plan. I had been hunting for music for the script, and I had been listening to Host the Planets, and I had isolated the one-tone poem on the planet Mars, which I was literally planning to lift thematic material from for the synthesizer score. So when we came up with it, we named the character. I said, well, let's take him to Madman and we'll call him Marz with a Z. So that's how we ended up with the name Marz in the end. Joseph Marz essentially was the guy, but we gave him the name Marz at the end because it came from that. And we just, when you're making a movie, it's a relentless experience. Once you pull that trigger and you're moving in pre-production every day toward shooting, you think quick. You come up with answers. If you had time to ruminate, you'd be dicking around with it for 3 weeks. But when you're in the middle of making a picture, you get it answered in 3 minutes. And so, we came up with another way of doing it. We had called our investor after we had one guy backing the picture. And we called him up on the phone and said, this is our situation that's come up. And we told him about the other company. And we said, this is our, and we want to let you know that this is happening. And if you have any questions about it and you doubts, we can pull the plug now. But this is our solution, and we think we'll be fine with it. And he decided to go with us, thank goodness. And so we just put everybody back into, shoot mode at the end of the weekend, and ran hell bent for leather to get it done, and pushed the opening date a couple of weeks to accommodate the change, because we had also at the same time we were hunting. We hadn't found Fish Cove yet, so we had location scout. I took out a map one day and I drew a radius of 50 miles from the center of Manhattan, and I said, find it. And they just went out, and these days this kind of stuff would be a lot easier. You could probably Google map your way to half of the stuff. In those days, you sent a guy out, and maybe 2 guys, maybe 3, and they went in different directions with their cameras, or they got on the phone with real estate agents, or they looked at maps, and they did all their hunting, and they did it all on foot, Lewis and Clark style. And then they'd come back and report and bring you pictures, and you'd develop them, and you'd look at them, and, so... But we did what we had to do, and here we are today.
Well, I have a question for Paul.
Yes, sir.
Paul, now, how did you get involved in this film? I mean, I'm just curious as to... basically, what I'm going to ask you is how you got it and your experience playing the Madman.
Okay. First of all, my background was I had gone to School of Visual Arts in Manhattan in the late 60s and 70s. I studied illustration there and art and design, and then switched over to film, and my degree is in filmmaking. But it's something I really did not pursue. It just, fate just took me in the direction of doing more painting and illustration. Right. That's where the work was, and that's what I was doing at the time. Turns out, Joey and Gary, we all had like mutual friends at the time, and my friend Jim, who had a farm, my friend Jim Grillo had a farm, and I remember one weekend Joe Giannone was out there, and I had met him, and and I had heard he was working on a project, and we talked a bit about horror because from when I was a little kid, I was, I pretty much every Saturday morning throughout the 50s, we would have an 11 o'clock at the RKO Keith's in Richmond Hill, Queens. They would have a different horror film. So I grew up pretty much in all the mid and late 50s into the 60s, all the horror movies that had come out. I pretty much saw them all in the theater, usually by myself, which was interesting. But so I had that horror background, and I loved horror movies. And so Joey was talking to me a bit about thoughts I had about horror, what I thought was frightening, what wasn't, and we talked, for a whole night about that. And then time went on, and I hadn't heard back from him about anything. I didn't expect to hear back from him on anything. And I know they were trying to keep the cost down on whatever they had to do with the film. And naturally, when you need somebody cheap, get me. So they called me to come in to work on the one sheet, the poster for the film. And we had done a number of designs for the one sheet, and I think at that time Gary and Joey had been to a number of people trying to cast for the Madman character, and I was reasonably big, and I have a martial arts background, and I do weapons work and training and all that, so I can swing an axe as good as the next guy. And so I was talking to the two of them in their office in the city, and we were talking about the character of Madman. I was kind of showing how I would illustrate him on the poster and kind of get in a position and this whole thing. I liked the thing, and they kind of turned to each other and they said, Paul, what are you doing for the next 2 months? And I went, oh my God, you're not serious. And they were. They gave me a shot at playing the character, and I jumped at it. I said, oh, I must do this. I just have to. So,
oh, yes.
So that's what happened, and that's kind of how I got it. And so I'll
jump in on that. I mean, we were looking at all kinds of big 7-foot dudes, but we couldn't find. Nobody had what we would have to call resonance. Nobody really brought the sense of what it meant to be a horror film monster.
Right.
And that was like something Joey and I just kept looking at each other and saying, yeah, he's big, but what can he bring to it beyond the bigness? And, we kept talking, and I just looked at Joey one day and said, Paul is big. Paul has feeling for this. This would be the right person who would really bring something to the party, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, it just elevated the character right away. And it made it more than just simply a gruesome-looking guy running around the woods. So,
well, the other thing too is that having gotten this wonderful opportunity and leaving my art jobs at the time, and everybody waving goodbye, we hope you come back, and all this. But so I went out and did this, and I thought, this could be my one and only shot at this.
Exactly.
So I didn't care what Gary or Joey asked me to do, so like break through this door, do that, do this, do that, do that. So I with great gusto tried to carry out every kill and everything that I had to do on screen. Like I said, thinking it may be my last, So I hope that came through on screen. I like to think I didn't just walk through it. Actually, he kind of lumbered through it. But,
yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of where I came from with it.
Lumbered and grunted.
And grunted indeed. Yeah, it always fascinated me, with Joseph, because I like so much doing accents and different voices, and there he has me going,
exactly.
What was I going to do? Sneak up on someone and go, oh, pardon me, I do have this axe, and it is late. That really wouldn't work. Like Shakespearean slasher, I don't think they really, I don't know, maybe that's a nice idea, but we'll see.
I don't know, I'm always surprised we didn't get a promo out of like Rolaids or Tums or something like that.
Something, right?
With that as a sound effect for stomach problem and more.
Go for
that with the remake.
I actually think the horror film really needs a very articulate, upscale, homicidal maniac.
Well, look, Hannibal Lecter.
I just thought of that when I said it. I just thought about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Sort of American Psycho.
Right.
Yeah.
But he does need like the Terry Toon type accent. Yeah, yes, sir. Welcome.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Gadzooks, there's a lot of blood when I have.
Madman lives in the zone of the more, of the grander tales of the woods and the backwoods and the back which comes at you from the dark, and almost more of a classical kind of monster. I mean, those other ones are very cool, modern 20th century monsters, and Madman is more of an age-old monster that you could read.
Right. Why we're afraid of the dark? Because once he starts rocking and rolling and does his thing, things happen very quickly. It really does. I mean, you don't last long in that movie.
No, it takes place in one night. I mean, literally dusk dawn.
No.
I mean, not the title or anything like that.
Now, the question that I want to ask you guys, there's always been horror film festivals. I mean, probably not as big as it is now. But, Paul, I've been going on some YouTube, and I've been watching you out at some of these horror conventions for Madman.
Mm-hmm.
And when did it start really getting big? I mean, obviously, it's like 30-some years later, but when did it start to get really, I should say...
I will tell you what happened. It's very interesting. Before Joey passed away, we had a showing out on Long Island at the Cinema Arts Center. And we had a showing there, and... We were not sure how that was going to roll, okay? And Joey and I, at the time, were amazed how many people showed up. I mean, we had done the film. It did its run. It was in theaters. People went to see it. It eventually came out on VHS and so forth and so on. But there was no gauge. I never had any kind of a gauge of how well the film was received later on or how it affected people. And I always wanted to know that. I'll say something about that in a minute. But when we showed it in the Cinema Arts Center, I mean, we had a packed house. And for the first time in my life, I had young people coming up to me going, there's this scene where you do this and that, and you raise the thing. How many times did you have to hit him with the... And I'm like, what? and like they knew dialogue, and they knew scenes, and it was like, I'm like... These people actually have seen this movie over and over again. They really love it. And, it amazed me and Joey, and we were so blown away by this. And then what started happening is we started going online and starting to read reviews. And, I remember I was making a lot of copies of these and mailing these to Joe. Various, sometimes not fabulous reviews, but, a lot of them really, really very decent, very good reviews. And, and I always felt that. I mean, I try to look at it objectively from my knowledge of other horror films throughout my life. And, we are not, it is not a bad movie. I mean, some people like to say that, and I always say, all right, get a camera and go make one, fool.
Amen, amen. I say that all the time in my reviews. Thank you.
Yeah, come on. You want to do better? Do better, okay?
Thank you.
And for what we had, and as limited as it was, and with the talents of Gary and Joey and what everybody brought to this, it does. It holds up. It's shot beautifully. It's eerie. The electronic music is great. I mean, you got to get that score released there, Gary. I mean, the music is great. All of that works great. And what you were asking about, the timing, and this is what happened for me. In 2006, I'm working at home. I have an art studio at home, and that's what I've been doing the last several years, is designing. I do some design work and so forth, and writing. And I'm home, and I get a phone call, and the guy says, do I have on the phone the real Madman Marz from the movie? And I went, yes, sir. Who's this? And they went on to explain that they were from this Dead Pit radio show, and that they would like very much to interview me on the phone. And I was like, whoa. And somebody somehow, I guess today it's easy to do, but somebody got my home phone number. And I started getting these calls. And this was 2006. And from this huge dead period of nothing, suddenly I get calls. And all these things start happening. And Icons of Fright, they did a piece on that. They came out to my house with photographers and 4 guys, and we sat around the dining room table, had a real big interview, did a lot of photographs of my house and me and so forth and so on. And it was wonderful. It was like this suddenly, back from the dead kind of thing that happened. And I said, my God. And here's the thing to me that was the most, just made my heart sing with this, because when we did the film, I was 30 years old, okay? And my friends that came to see it, who were also horror fans and, liked the genre movies, they all went to see the film. They were all 30s, whatever year, and we talked about it later on, and they were very analytical about the story and so forth and so on, and talked about it like adults.
Right.
But I wanted to know what kids thought.
Right.
And there was no way I could know what kids thought at that time, because I wanted to know, do little kids, 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old kids, get the same feeling seeing Madman that I had when I saw Horror of Dracula and things like that? Did this scare kids? And I just never knew. I never knew until they started calling me in to do the radio interviews, and the guys came to my house, and they were all here at the house, and they're like staring at me, and we met first in a hamburger restaurant in Huntington, New York, and they're sitting there having the hamburgers, and they bought me lunch, and they're staring at me, and I'm going, what? And they go, we can't believe we're sitting here having a hamburger with Madman Marz.
Wow.
And I said, guys, thank you, that's so cool. And I remember one funny thing is, after we had a day in the house here of writing the interview and so forth, I remember I had an axe or a broom. I'd like to think it was an axe or a broom near the front door, and it was nighttime at that time, and the guys had to back up my driveway on the gravel driveway to leave, and the car's packed with like 5 guys, and they had me in the headlights for a minute, and I grabbed the axe, and I start walking towards the car like I do in the film when I'm backlit, and I hear these guys, these adults, screaming in the car. And they open the windows, and the guy said, he's like, oh my God, man! He said, that was my greatest nightmare fear as a kid, that Madman would be walking towards my father's car.
Wow.
And he said, thank you, man. And it was like just so, it's just so inspiring for me when I found out it did scare kids. It did it. It scared them.
Yeah.
And then doing shows, I got invited I used to do Chilla Theater as a collector, Kevin Clement's Chilla Theater in New Jersey. I used to do it as a collector. I go and I collected art, comic art, sculptural art, resin kits, things like that. I've always enjoyed that stuff. And Kevin knew Madman. He knew the movie. And a lot of the guys who worked his show. I'm going to switch phones, guys. This one is dying. Hold on a second now.
Hey, during that point,
hello,
one second. Wait for a minute, guys. I'll be right back. Paul, we'll keep talking.
All right.
Yes, okay. So,
Okay, I'll be right.
okay, Gary, gotcha. I'm on the other phone now. So Kevin says to me, he says, why don't you do the show? Because I used to go as a friend. I'd go and buy stuff. He said, why don't you do the show? I said, why? I said, 5 people have seen this movie.
Yeah.
This is what he started telling me in the 2000s, before the kids from the radio, before that all started. He used to say, why don't you do the show, man? You have fans. I said, nah, what? Like I said, 5 or 6 people? What? He said, no, man, do the show. So he set me up to do the first show in 2006 on Halloween. And I remember I had no stuff prepared. I wasn't ready. This was not my living. So many people, God bless them, people who were like iconic in a lot of movies. It really helps them out. They do the shows,
Yeah.
they sell merchandise. It's great for them. Okay, it keeps their legends alive, which is lovely to see.
Right.
But I didn't have any stuff. So my wife and I went. Now she's an artist too. My wife Eddie. So we went around. We had pictures blown up. I had posters made. I had all this crazy stuff made to lay out on the table because I wanted to be prepped for it. And it was an amazing thing to have people walk up to you and just recount terror stories of when they were little. One guy said to me, when we were growing up, there was a $5 bet that you would not go out in the dark. This is his cousins and his brothers and stuff. You would not go out in the dark near the woods, yell out the name Madman Marz as loud as you can, and stand there for 5 minutes. You would get $5. And nobody ever collected. Nobody ever did it. They freaked out. And it's so for me it was glorious finding out. You think of yourself. Here I am doing my art, my design work, and all that. And here I am, playing a monster in a movie, and which is like very different than. I don't want to say that. I was going to say it's very different than. I'd like to think I'm a little funny, but I'm sorry I'm not getting on the phone going. Yeah. I always wanted to play a monster. I think I did real good, don't you? You know, I mean, if that happened, it would be like, oh my God, man, who is this guy? I can see why they hired him. Oh my God. But no, getting back to that, it has tickled me every time I hear someone talk about how it scared them when they were little. And now, you know, I hear from people overseas who saw it. You know, it's been this delightful kind of reawakening and understanding of what effect it had on people when they were children. And I think that's the thing. I think I was gauging it, as I said, by what my friends thought. And we were all filmmakers and stuff. It was hard to, sometimes I thought they were just being courteous to me, you know, and that kind of stuff. But it's the kids I wanted to hear from. And there you go. It worked for kids. It scared them.
Yeah.
And that for me was, that was worth everything, man. That was the coolest part.
Yeah, when I was watching the YouTube videos, I can see the gleam in your eye. I can see how, you know, something that's made that long ago, it's so, I mean, I can just see how, just by what you told us, how your life was changed in 2006.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. It really was. It's almost like Joey, I think it had said to me near the end, you know, he surprisingly passed on, but he said to me, who knew? Who knew this? We didn't know this. You know, we didn't know about it. No one was contacting us. No one, you know, they just weren't, you know, and unfortunately, he passed away just about at that time. He never got to see any of this. Wow. I mean, from wherever he is, and I do believe he's somewhere, I hope, where he can look down on this or up, either way. But you know, I mean, you know, he kind of missed the physical part of being here and going through this, which I know he would have loved, you know, because it's the one film. And it's funny because, in a sense, maybe, you know, Gary and Joey both, in a sense, were almost reluctant, perhaps, to maybe having to do a horror film. Okay, I think, like many artists, I think they felt that, you know, to make the money, as many do, make the horror film, or make the some kind of film that would have a lot of popularity, and from that, you know, get enough money in your budget to really do something very serious. So I think, you know, they kind of started with that, pick the horror genre. I mean, they could have done that. They could have an exploitation movie, I think, but they chose, thank goodness, horror. And interesting for Joey to be known for forever as that's his little piece of filmmaking, man. And you know, but it does. Getting back, it does hold up, and I'll watch it, and you know, I'll watch it with people seeing it for the first time. And Scott, you say you've seen it just recently for the first time?
No, Jeff did.
Jeff saw it recently. Okay.
Yep.
I did. And I have to tell you, and I assume it was a fairly limited budget.
Yes.
For the thing that your camera work and the cinematography were top notch.
Well, you know, I think, you know, Gary can tell you more about that. It was. I mean, I've seen so many films of that period or a few years prior where it's just god-awful. And, I mean, it looks like somebody shot stuff in Super 8. You know, it's like, please, you know, with no lighting, no this. That's why I take it very personally when people attack us on that level, you know, and they're wrong. They're just wrong, okay?
Well, I'll tell you something. Someone who I know down here in South Florida who's a fairly well-established filmmaker, and he said this to me, and it's so true, and this is really what you got to aim that criticism at. And they said, if you know, just having made a feature film, just having done it to completion is something to be incredibly proud of.
Absolutely.
So many people start it and can't finish it for whatever reason or the other. Exactly. And just having done it is really something to tip your hat at and take pride in.
Right, absolutely true, so true. And Gary, are you back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I was listening to that.
No.
Who knew that Madman Marz was so eloquent and long spoken? Here.
He's articulate beyond the pale.
There we go. Gary, the guys were talking about the cinematography and how good it was. I thought maybe you could chime in on that a bit about Jim.
Well, you know, Joey and I hunted as we did for everything else. I mean, every picture, if you start out anew, either you're going into it with a cadre of buddies that you're working on things with together, or you're reaching out into the industry to find people that you've never worked with before in order to put together your crew. I mean, I just went through that in the last few months with the girl on the train. I mean, yeah, there's all the people you know and love that you'd like to have on, and then there's all of the reasons why you can't get them at a particular time and date because they're either booked on something else or your current budget is not enough to really sustain them, or you're no longer really friends because the last picture destroyed it, and, whatever the thing may be. So when we went to make Madman, I was coming from an area where I had done a bunch of things, working on low-budget R-rated sex comedies back in the day, and a couple of X-rated porn things to cut my teeth and get experience. Both of us were in film school, and anyone who's gone to film school and come out into the industry will tell you that film school gives you some skeletal structure to understand equipment and history and criticism and things like that, but the industry is the industry, and it's its own world. And so if you want to work in the business, you get out in the business and you start to work. And you meet people, and one thing leads to another, and that's how you keep working. So we went out hunting. We needed a DP of a higher quality than we had been working with in the things we were doing. And we just started looking at a lot of different pictures, a lot of horror, a lot of action, to see who might fit the bill. And one guy's work we liked a lot, who'd done things for Abel Ferrara, the great Abel Ferrara, who you probably know, the Bad Lieutenant, and Driller Killer, and Ms. 45 and things like that back from the day.
Right.
And he wasn't doing horror, Abel, but he was doing more action and edgy stuff like that. And we really liked the work on Ms. 45 and a couple of things like that. And we tracked down the DP. His name was Jimmy Lemo. He was, of course, a union guy, so that's why he reads as James Momel on the screen, because he needed to not put his name up front. But, he was a really good cinematographer, well-versed in 35, had done a lot. He has directed also since a number of action pictures and B stuff. And he was the guy that we felt had the qualities that would give us a look that we thought would elevate us. And of course, you're chasing around with your budget there, trying to make a decision. And now this is long before digital ever popped its head into the world of possibility for a television, for a theatrical motion picture. So, the choices back then were either 16 or 35. I mean, video didn't even exist for all intents and purposes. 1980, VHS was still in the war with Beta. That's how old it was. And so his stuff was just really exceptional. He came in, we spoke, we got along. He was willing to work for the rate that we had, and so we brought him on. And he did a bang-up job of elevating. We also made the decision to go 35. It was a big decision because it cost us quite a bit more than 16. But when we went to the marketplace, it would give us a distinction above a lot of the other pictures that were there, and make us look more like pros. Okay, and also there were costs down the line. You shoot 16, the next thing you know, you get a distributor. There's another $25,000 cost to bump it up anyway. Right. So we figured we would just take it on and come there delivering what they would really want in the end, no matter what, and separate ourselves from anybody who was, slightly lower in the world. So it was a sort of a business decision, as well as a quality decision. Shooting at night, you get a little more stop out of 35 than 16. So that was useful in the day. And then Jimmy applied what has now become the apparently, and we learned this lesson the hard way in releasing the 30-year anniversary DVD, the signature blue tint to to the night look. It has that really deep blue. I don't know. Is it deep blue? It just got that blue wash that kind of says, "Hey, this is night." And we actually timed it a little bit warmer when we did the DVD release for the 30-year anniversary release. And we got a lot of shit from a lot of fans that said, "Wait, what happened to the blue?" Because we warmed it up a little bit, it made it a little more natural, and we caught some flack for it. So when we go to Blu-ray, I'll make sure the blue goes back and make everybody happy along those lines. But Jimmy was great, and he had great sense of composition, knew what he was doing. We didn't have to think about, well, we're doing the right kind of this or that. He understood the lab, so it was a good experience. And like I say, he and a lot of other people, everybody was found along the way.
Gary, I always wanted to ask you this because Gary, his whole life is music, really, and I've been collecting soundtracks since I was 9. I pretty much draw to soundtrack music. But Gary, how did you get Steven with this, and what was your guidelines with how he wrote the electronic score?
Well, I had been myself an electronic musician, and and I had been studying that before I switched over. I was a music composition major, and before I switched over to combine that with my love of drama and film and everything else, I was doing a lot of electronic music in the earliest days, before synthesizers really. The only synthesizers that existed were Buchlas and Moogs and ARPs. There was no Prophet 5, there was no DX7, there was none of the performance synths that came out in the late 70s, early 80s, which changed the face of modern music. So I was working with mainframe computers, spending 3 weeks to do a 30-second piece with punch cards. And I'd become well-versed with a lot of the electronic musicians in town, and, it was a new and budding art form. And I just hunted through some of the guys I had met at some of the New York haunts for this kind of stuff, like the Kitchen downtown in Soho and places where people were doing this. And I ran across Steven through, some connections from different people. And he had a little 3-piece kind of synthesis art band, and they would go out and do, they wouldn't go out with instruments. They went out with synthesizers and did live performances. And he was getting involved in all kinds of stuff. He went on after us to do Reading Rainbow, and he ended up winning an Emmy for that, and tons of these little Reading Rainbow episodes. Now he's a well-known, preeminent reason and logic guru that everybody goes to, and he has a website for teaching all that kind of stuff, and he does a lot of electronic music for all kinds of people, all kinds of shows and of every nature. But there were only a few people I could have gone to in the day there that would have understood what I was looking for, because a lot of guys I didn't want them to go and make me don't go use the synthesizer to make regular music for me. I wanted electronic sounds. I wanted electronic music that didn't rely on the concept of, we're trying to emulate a piano, we're trying to emulate a horn. It wasn't important to me. It was more important that you get an atmosphere. Find an atmosphere. I don't care if it sounds like a violin. I don't care what you go for there. Just, do it with the synthesis to get us something that is unique to the ear. And I think he achieved that, actually. I think he really did. And we have yet to release the soundtrack album on it, and it will happen at some point. As we move along, it will definitely happen. We'll put out the separate soundtrack in the right way. I mean, there are a couple of points in the there's some really great moments of synthesis there. One of my favorite themes is when Madman is coming down the tree. And
I love that theme, actually.
Yeah, there's just this descending sound that just goes so well, and it's just creepy, and it has almost, it almost throws back to the 40s, creepy pictures that were being made, the funky stuff that was being made.
Like the Wolfman and things like that, yeah.
Yeah, it had that kind of a quality to it, but it really fit that really well. And of course, I always liked the drum beat that comes at the end there when we do what we call the high noon walk.
Yeah.
When we shotgun across the courtyard to go back to see who was in the main house and check out the screens, and there's that boom, boom, and it just slowly, there, and keeps you going. Then whenever there's a big hit of any kind, Steven just created a cacophony of wildness that went on that I don't think people had ever heard in those days. It was brand new to them. Now, they're more used to electronic music. But even so, this really tried to stay electronic and not become, music all the time, which I think was a good pick. And I'm in touch with him now and then. I actually see him at certain events together, and maybe he'll even jump in and do the remake with us. We'll see how things work along those lines.
Wow.
Well,
a lifelong fan of Tomita here, so I knew electronic music back in the 70s too, and that's not back then. You are so right, Gary. That is not an undertaking for the faint of heart back then. That was just looking at the size of the units you guys had to use and and the technology that was available just to create those sounds was just daunting.
It was.
It's not today. It's not today like plugging a MIDI keyboard into your computer.
Very few things on the shelf.
Oh yeah.
That you could reach out to. But Steve had a synthesizer or two in his studio, and I would go in with him. I would not send him, but I would go down there with taped clips of things that I would create at home on my keyboard, and I would bring it into him, and then he would then put it through his system and regurgitate it out the other end with his tweak to it. So, I'm listed on the credits as music supervisor, and that was mostly because I was there, just working themes with him all the time, and then letting him loose to turn it into what he had. So that was always interesting. And then I was recording all of the little background actual song stuff that was hiding back there. I was doing that separately and recording those and putting them in. But it was an interesting experience, and it's always great when you put the music onto a picture. I mean, it should never be taken lightly, because it is that which enters the audience through a mechanism that's very intuitively based. Mm-hmm. And so when sounds get into people's heads, it makes them see through that filter. And so if you want them to understand something as terror but with a comic edge, you can do it with the way you tweak the sound. If you want it to be straight terror, you don't, maybe you stay in the minor key and you keep the dissonance and you avoid anything that's a clean sound. And and a lot of that music just set the tone everywhere you look. So it was a very important factor. And you don't get to put it on usually until the later end of things. You can't really prescribe it much at the front end. You really need to see the pictures to know what you're dealing with. So it's a strange part of the process, because you're often rushed at the end to try to get this stuff done, and and how many times can you go over it? You don't like the sound, you have to send it back, and on bigger budget things, they have the time to play around with this. On a lower budget things, you really kind of have to, you get a couple shots and then you got to go forward. Plus, back in the day, working with this stuff was not anywhere near as easy as it is now. I mean, the new technologies have made this, it's ridiculous. I sit here, I write three songs worth of material here, I send it over to you, and an hour later you have it in 2 minutes. You go over it, you come back to me. I mean, we go back and forth 6 times, and the time it would take me to have done, take me a week to do that back in the day. Yep. So it was a different, game there. You give somebody the material, you don't hear it for 5 days. So now it's all very, very malleable and easier.
The success... Go ahead.
Hmm?
I was going to say the success of you mentioned the piece when Mars comes down out of the tree and is up in the tree. I think if I had to get one scene that almost every fan who saw it as a young person, the thing that stuck with them almost more than any other scene is the scene of Mars in the tree. And I guess the tones and music of that scene, when he creeps down out of the tree, that's the one they say stayed with them their whole lives. I mean, so much so, as kids would tell me, they still would look up into the trees when they went out into the woods just because of that. So that was a very successful blend of both the visual and the wonderful scoring at that point.
Well, before we go into the remake talk, Gary surprised me. I've seen the movie. I had to actually still have the VHS yet, believe it or not. I saw it a long time ago, and I rewatched it. It's a 2006 3-year edition, whatever it is, and I reviewed it. And Paul and Gary's seen it, and I was quite surprised that Gary sent me an email saying, "Hey, thanks a lot for the review." Because normally when podcasters review 80s movies, you hardly ever get feedback from a writer, let alone an actor from that film. So I was totally blown away. And what was so ironic is me and Jeff were talking about doing a podcast together, something different. And lo and behold, Gary calls me. Okay, our first interview for our show. And I couldn't have picked 2 better guys to do a podcast with. So I want to thank you guys now before I forget, which I won't forget. Thanks for coming on. But the stories, no problem. The stories are amazing. And Jeff, let me ask you a question. What is your experience so far as doing a podcast like this? Was it like...
It's except for my co-host, it's been great.
Eat shit, Freeman.
I told you, I'm the Costello to your rabbit. But I did have one more question before we...
No, we're not ending. I just want to ask you.
Just real quick, Gary, let me take you back to 1982, just real quick. Because I tried to make this point a little earlier. You had all these other movies coming out, or had just come out recently, around the time yours had. And it really was the early 80s, late 70s, were really an explosion of the slasher type film. And did this help you guys get noticed easier, or did you get kind of, did you feel you got lost in the flood of films, or were distributors just like hungry for them at that point?
Well, here's what happened. This is the reality of what went down in that picture, in that period. I mean, there were all kinds of horror films being made, a lot of them by independent studios, Compass International, run by Erwin Yablans, and a couple others whose names I can't recall, maybe Seven Arts, and some of these, maybe Corman back in those days. And they were all releasing through some kind of block of distributors, sub-distributors around the country. The distribution, the film distribution network of the country had been basically put in place through the majors coming out of the 30s and 40s and into the 50s and 60s. And there was a whole business full of distributors and sub-distributors and sub-subs in order to bicycle all these prints around the country all the time to handle the regular movies that were going out. Out of that group came these independent companies like Compass and Corman and whatever, and they started taking advantage of that to make their own independent pictures and get them released independently. There was no DVD, there was no VHS there was no TV even up to a certain point. TV started to chop into that into the 60s and 70s, and by the time you got into the late 70s, it had made a dent in theaters and changed the way theaters were not doing as well. They had cinema vision and this vision and that vision, all to try to come back against television and make themselves look different. And they were very open, and they were not doing great. So what happened was when Paramount picked up Friday the 13th. Before that, Halloween with Compass International went out and did $60 million worth of business with a $600,000 film. That was the Erwin Yablans thing with Halloween 1, the first one, which is a brilliant piece of filmmaking. That basically suddenly said to the majors, gee, there's a market out here. And Paramount was the first one to jump on it, and they grabbed the $600,000 Friday the 13th, number one, put that out, and they did $60 million plus in business. All of a sudden, every major studio was caught with nothing on the shelves for horror, and they all wanted in. You know how they are, sheep-like like that. Everybody wanted to make out on this new market that was suddenly discovered. So, for a while, they were picking up anything with a knife and a piece of blood in it. So anybody that made a horror film went to Hollywood, and they were immediately bought as soon as they got there. So if you went out with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, whatever you had, made a movie fast enough and got out there, you were getting paid back immediately, $1 million, $1.5 million, and everybody was rolling in dough and thrilled about it in the independent world. When we went out to make Madman, when I looked at the marketplace and I was checking around to see what our competition was and blah, 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 this is like late 1980, I start to see that there are maybe 15 pictures in production that fit the bill, that are planning to go to the American film market. Okay, when we get to the American film market, like later, in February, or whatever the hell it was, there's 135 pictures there. And at this point, what's happened is while we're in the process of making Madman, as you well know, every week, 2 or 3 horror films were being released, from Terror Train to Basket Case to Mother's Day to April Fool's Day. Friday the 13th 2 is now coming out, Halloween 2. So basically what happened was the market, from the point where we discovered the opportunity to jump in on it, and it was red hot, saturated itself. By the time we got to Hollywood, all the majors now had at least 3 to 5 of these pictures sitting in their queue, ready to release whenever necessary. So the amount of advance money that was being offered suddenly dipped. And you couldn't, by the time we got there, my friend Armand Mastriani he went to school with me at Richmond College. He Knows You're Alone, which, by the way, Tom Hanks has his first movie role in there somewhere.
Right.
They made that for $600,000. They got to L.A., MGM bought it for $1.2 million. So they doubled their money immediately. And $600,000 in those days?
Oh, yeah.
That sounded low back then. I want you to know, I just made Girl on the Train for under $450. So,
no, it only sounds low to people that aren't familiar with, the history of film. And I'll give you a great example. Network, which had a bevy of you could say slightly fading and hot top stars in it, at the time was made for a budget for a little over $3 million in the mid '70s. So $3 million to make Network? Come on.
Yeah, and look at the director and look at the star list.
Yeah,
and look at the writer.
Yeah,
Ayevsky.
Yeah, that's a lot of money back then.
What's that?
That is an awful lot of money back then. Yeah,
it was, but it was also Hollywood-style filmmaking, fully unionized, in the middle of New York. You never know where these things are going to go. You get the paranormals that get made for $30,000 and hit a vein, and all of a sudden they're doing $800 million of gross.
Right.
They're truly a rarity, and you go out and you do what you got to do. But we got the money for Madman because of the same thing that kind of oversaturated the market for us. Also, was the very same thing that got us the money. So every sword has two edges, in the sense that to pitch the picture, Joey and I basically said, look, we have no track record. We have nothing we can show. We don't have any stars to put in here, which is the traditional way that everybody sells stuff. The only thing we have is that horror is the star, and horror is a box office hit right now. So we went and took every week, the New York Times, Newsweek, Time Magazine, every magazine had a little feature article about how low-budget horror films were making big headway at the box office. So we took all of those articles and compiled them into our pitch. And when I went to see investors, basically it was, look, it's not me and this guy next to you here telling you that this is has tremendous success potential. This is the rest of the world telling you. Look, ask the New York Times, ask Newsweek, ask Time Magazine, look at the Wall Street Journal. They're talking about, here's the numbers, here's what's going on. And so that helped us to sell the movie. The fact that there was so much horror and it was doing so much business. And as I said, by the same token, when we got to the market, there was so much horror and so much business that it limited the amount of advance we were able to get. We still got something, but we didn't get the big buyout that we were hoping we would get from the investors and get everybody out. So it was that kind of a thing. But we ended up getting our investor out pretty well by the time all was said and done. But it was just the nature of the beast, It was a lot of horror films were coming out. A lot of guys never got anything distributed in the end. Came to a certain point, and after about 1983, 84, the slasher and horror genre was not releasing in the same manner, and it was quiet for a while until some other kind of specialty things started to pop up here and there, and you would get the Texas Chainsaw would come out, or something like that which would reinvigorate it again. The truth of the matter is, as a genre, and now that we have the internet cataloging it all for the last bunch of years, we can see that there's a lot of different things inside of the horror genre. I mean, slasher is one, and there's other kinds of horror that people like. I mean, now you got the new, the new style with what is it? The one with the caterpillar. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, good Lord, the Human Centipede.
Yes, Human Centipede.
Yeah, you got Human Centipede. That's a new style of horror.
Shit.
And then you had, now the new run on zombies is back, and you're getting all of that kind of stuff. Vampires never seem to go away. So there's all these different tributaries inside the big ocean of the genre now there's different people that love different things. I mean, and they wax and wane. All of a sudden, you get the Scream series where you get a sort of a comic horror going there, and that's working. Enough of that, and then another thing comes back. The paranormals and those things start to come in. So slasher is on. We're going to come in and out. I mean, there's going to be a period where new slasher picture done right is going to also hit the mark at the box office, and things to go, get picked up again. So we're in that world, and Madman is an icon of fright that, and that's why I want to do the remake, is because I believe that he, in the pantheon of horror genre characters, and the Michael Myers and the Fright, and the various other guys, that there's a place for Marz in there, and it should be a little bit higher up on that list now. We could reinvigorate his character around the world, and maybe that's a good lead into the discussions about the remake. The same place. It's the same general idea. I mean, as we had always felt. I mean, Madman is as we were saying earlier in the conversation, the Madman Marz is a quintessential icon of fright of the ages. It's the kind of thing that is, whereas something like we were talking about, American Psycho makes sense to an urban audience here in the United States. I don't know what it'll mean to people in Sri Lanka or around the world in other marketplaces that are more rural, But Madman is more of your woods, kind of fear of the dark, who's going to come and get you from there. And I think that works everywhere around the world, and it's around for all time. So in that respect, we're going to maintain the same idea, that he's a long-term monster that's more about your personal inner fears of the dark and what you don't, and the unknown, and also about the question of whether or not, how far you let your imagination and your belief system go in believing tales of legends and things that you're told, and whether or not there's a reason to believe in them. Things become legends in a given area about the monster in the woods or the creature that will come out of the cave, because something has happened at some point or another that's real. Somebody's been killed, some head is rolled, something's gone down, and it's happened enough that it gets passed around enough that it creates some legend around it. I mean, back in the day, this took a little while to get these things out there into the world to become legend and stick. These days, all you need is a Twitter feed, and it's done in an hour. But it's the same essential human quality that makes it happen. Somebody makes a statement, somebody else hears it and agrees or disagrees or comments on it. That passes on to another person, and next thing you know, you've got a discussion and a legend that's either believed by some or not believed by others, but there is something to discuss. And Madman fits into that, and I think that Jason and Freddie and Michael have had the stage for a long time. I mean, they certainly have played out, enough remakes to serve them. And I think Madman, which has never had that remake yet, is certainly deserving of a remake and the ability, or a reimagining, depending on how you want to think of it, and bring it out to a new audience. A lot of our audience now, from my Facebook page, I know, they're not the older guys. I mean, Madman came out in '82, so a guy that was like, between 12 and 16 then is now in his 40s or more. And so, those were the kids like we were laughing about before, who might sneak away the DVD, the VHS while the parents were gone, or somebody's older brother or the babysitter was watching. In some cases, people tell me their parents were watching it, and they would let them watch it, or they would sneak it after they left. But those guys are in their 40s and up. There's still a whole new young crowd, which is discovering the original Madman, that loves the 80s slashers. And there's a whole bunch of young kids that are going to see, that are populating these new horror pictures and these new paranormals and all those things that are in that marketplace, that will come out for a new version of Madman if we get to put it out there.
Yeah.
Certainly theatrical is our goal. and I've had excellent talks with Anchor Bay, who had released the original DVD, was released by Anchor Bay in 2000. And Kevin Kasha over there, who's the head of acquisitions and production at Anchor Bay, has told me he's ready to make the remake with me. And
excellent.
So I've been talking with him and trying to get that moving forward. And a little bit of a detour here doing The Girl on the Train, which took up most of my life for the last bunch of months. But that's wrapping up now and should ease off as I work my way back into more efforts on Madman. And to that end, I'm looking at trying to, bring in. We have been talking with some major WWE and TNA wrestlers as a possibility to step in to do Madman. And that's one thing. In terms of just simply the marketplace, we're looking for a way to give us some distinctions there. And cast helps. It helps me to get the deal going with the distributors. And it just helps in general, where, because if you notice these days, they're making a lot of these pictures and there are recognizable faces in them. It's passing the place where you can't have anybody that's, everybody can be unknown. The distributors in the foreign market has changed tremendously. I mean, it used to be a lot easier to sell things to the foreign markets. Now they want like A-list stars in half the stuff.
Right.
So you have to have something to put on the table besides just simply good horror, good story, good background, good effects, something in the marquee level for cast to help them along the line. So to that effect, somebody from that zone, which would bring us, already an audience that we probably already have, for people who go to, who attend wrestling and like UFC and that kind of stuff, will probably also horror fans. So it'll just, give us direct access to that audience on top of everything else. And I'm talking to a pretty major casting director in New York that I just worked with to get on board with me to help me get some good young people, with some talent that can play in the roles, of the camp counselors and campers themselves. And that could come from some of the main TV shows that are out there right now. Supernatural has some people that we could go for. Some of the kids from Gossip Girl. I mean, some of the other people that are doing daytime TV or network TV, where you can. They're people that the audience recognizes, and they're good actors, and they want to do stuff. So
right. That's
another area that we're looking at the same time.
Now, is Paul going to have a cameo?
Hmm?
Is Paul going to have a cameo in it?
We're going to figure out a place for that. We have a couple of places that works.
Well, you remember in the original, the older guy at the campfire that was telling the story? There you go, Paul.
Max. Well, we talked about that at one point, but the main, I should show up somewhere in the film. I think. Yeah.
You have to.
Let's just use the original cast.
The original what?
Use the original cast for the remake.
The original cast?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, finding them is one thing. Second of all,
40-year-old. Jeff, you jackass.
If you watch the DVD, the feature on there, I tracked down as many of them as I could find when we were doing it. And one of them is, of course, the guy who played Max, who is now 85 years old. And I was barely. I got a really nice interview with him, but I fear it may have been his last. I just. He was pretty old and not doing so well, but he granted me the interview, and I went out to Jersey to his house and got it with him. But Max is a very tricky character because that, the kind of people who could play that character. I mean, look, I just worked with Stephen Lang. I mean, if I could get Stephen Lang to do that, it would be a miracle. I mean, Stephen Lang, who was the Colonel Quaritch in Avatar. It's the older, venerable camp director. Anybody between, 45 and 65. And it doesn't hurt, it could be a Lance Hendricks guy. It could be Bruce Campbell could possibly do it, But those are the things these days that you sort of need to help you to present to the marketplace because the distributors are insistent upon something that they can hang their hat on. And look, it's not just they're all great personalities for these roles. I mean, they all will bring something wonderful to the Max character. the guy gets to tell a great campfire tale, and he has some other possibilities that are there in that Joey and I, before he passed, had written a sequel to Madman, which was called Hunt the Madman, which was all about, after all was said and done, the survivor, or the survivors that were left over are reached out to by younger brothers and sisters of some of the dead people who have been tracking odd murders. Now they're using all kinds of fancy, GPS stuff and the internet and all that stuff, and they've been tracking these weird murders that have the stamp of Madman's profile on them, and they're showing how it's worked its way from where the original story took place. It's working its way out into the deeper woods and into another part of the country. So they come upon our surviving heroes and talk them into going out to hunt the madman with them so that they could track them down and avenge the deaths of their relatives and friends. So there's a whole other movie there, and in that, the Max character would play prominently as being part of that. It's sort of a combination there of action, adventure, and horror. And
I'm sorry about that. That's just my weird sense of humor when I made that statement.
Yeah, right.
I do realize your original Betsy is 60-something years old right now, and because I looked her up on IMDb and is a documentary filmmaker apparently. So
Betsy.
I don't Ross have to reprise
a pretty good doc filmmaker, director. She's got a number of interesting pictures out there. She's also not being particularly helpful to us in granting many interviews or anything. She sort of says she has a different career now and is trying not to mix the two. So
it might be tougher to get her to do that hot tub scene again.
I think once is enough for her and us. So that was yeah. I hear you. That's a good one. But the new Madman would be updated in the sense of same kind of cast, a little bit of a different twist to certain things, but essentially updated with the kind of language, the kind of technology that would be there. Cell phones are involved, regular stuff's involved. And,
no signal. No.
What's that?
No signal. Most of the horror film movies now, no signal on my phone. No.
Yeah, we had to make a choice when we put that in, and my feeling was either it works all the time or it doesn't work at all.
Right.
That's the approach to it, and I just felt it would let it work and use it for what it is, and wherever it could work, it would work, and even with that, there's certain frustrations because you call, you go to the message for some reason or another, or you call and somebody just doesn't pick up in time, or there's lots of other ways to use it.
Or you lost the charger,
And there's always batteries, and there's always that kind of, so all that, or people leaving their phone behind and it's not with them when you call them. There's plenty of ways to play that.
Or Madman's a phone thief.
In the new one, we tried to, like I say, adhere to the basic underlying idea that this is a grand legend of historic proportion that people are, either if they diss it, they find out why they shouldn't have, and eventually everybody ends up with a healthy respect for the fact that, well, whether you believe it or not, there's something going down here. There are dead people all around,
right?
And so that's the general idea, and and it still will take place in a summer camp, a little slightly different. It may not be the camp for gifted children that we listed in the original. It may just be the end of a regular camping experience, and those who are left in that final night are the CI team, the counselor and staff, and the main folks wrapping it up. And we threw some twists and turns in there. There's a new character or two that will create some fun and some excitement, and but there's also the other same thing that we're going to retain is the idea. Joey and I were into like gratuitousness of just showing the blood for the blood's sake or all that. Everything was always attached to story development and where things were going. So, you get to see stuff, but it's not about lingering and it's not about overdoing it. It's about just using it for the position that it deserves, either as a shocker moment or as a conclusion to something that you've been trying to, wonder, well, what happened there? But never just to sit there and linger on blood and guts. We always felt it was better to keep Madman more under wraps, not see him too much, not get familiar with his face, until show him in parts until we got to later down the line and we could reveal him more. And I think that it's not just us, that's traditional to a lot of, successful horror pictures and things along those lines. So we're going to be following that routine. And if all goes well, I'll be shooting by late summer somewhere and get this thing into the theaters by 2013.
Excellent.
That's the hope and dream.
All right, well...
To plug a little bit, okay?
Yep.
For any of your audience that wants to, know more and track us and be involved, and have direct stuff, or, buy the DVD, the 30-year anniversary DVD directly, or get a T-shirt. I even have some classic, still in the shrink wrap, very rare DVDs from Anchor Bay that are available. They're not cheap, but they're there. Not many people have them. But they can, become, I'd love to have them become just, whether they buy anything or not, that's not a big deal. Join our, like us on our Facebook page at Madman Marz Movie on Facebook.
Yep.
It's very simple. It's just Madman Marz Movie, and that's Mars with a Z. And they can then be in touch. As you can see, I'm happy to answer questions. Anything I can't answer, I pass over to Paul and let him answer. And so the more people we can get, on board, the better it is. It always is, fun. We've got fans, literally, just a fan just reached me from Germany, asking me for a T-shirt and a DVD. I've shipped to Australia. I've shipped all over the United States. So, I'm happy to accommodate people, and I'm also happy to dialogue with them when they reach us on Facebook.
And I will make personal appearances at birthday parties.
Excellent. Only children's parties, I hope.
Yes, he does face painting. He does it with a knife, though. It's very unusual.
It's a very unusual thing. And getting a cake big enough for me to jump out of is always difficult, but it works. It's fun.
And there's also, they can follow on Twitter at the Madman Marz. Twitter.com/the Madman Marz, which is another way of reaching us. And, once again, always happy to talk with fans and see what they have to say. A lot of the fans, the first thing I ask them when they join up on Facebook is, what was your first experience seeing Madman? When did you see it? Where did you see it? Who did you see it with? And I'll tell you, I've got a whole list of them that I just keep compiling of everybody's first time, and it's all pretty interesting when you hear people do it.
Well, considering I just liked the page on Facebook right now, I can't wait till you ask me so that my response can be published on Facebook. My first impression of Madman Marz was interviewing a couple of lunatics that were associated with making it.
Oh,
there you go.
Post it on your timeline. Okay.
There you go.
All right, good. And the more the merrier there. So that sounds very good. So any other questions you guys can just always email me and I can be helpful and to answer that.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well,
I hope you got enough.
Oh, yeah.
You got enough to go with? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Now
if you have the year anniversary DVD, there's lots more stories and, repeats of some of the things we told you, but more stories in the feature that we did on there, 30 Years of Madman. There's a whole lot of different stories and images and all kinds of stuff.
Save one for me.
Listen, I want to say, if you want me to lay down a little something over the phone for your show, I'll do it.
Yep.
Do you wish to call me back so we could do it that way?
Yeah, I can do it that way.
Okay.
That'd be good.
I mean, give me 5 minutes to do a little something, and then I'd be available.
All right.
Excellent, Paul.
Well, before you guys go, I want to give you guys a special thanks for coming on the show. Gary, I appreciate the feedback, the comeback, the phone call last week. It made my day. We talked about age earlier. I'm the youngest of the four here, not by much. I ain't no 20-year-old. I mean, I'll be 44 this year, so I was 14 in 1982 when that was released. So I was at the perfect age group for that film. So it's a deepest gratitude and thanks for you guys coming on.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Very good. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
All right, man. Be good. Take care. Wait,
Take care.
let me leave you with this for the fans. Hold on. A little growl. Here we go. Ready? There we go.
Fantastic.
Okay, guys.
Thank you very much.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Be good. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great one, guys.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.